The silence was deafening as I stood in the middle of our laboratory, frozen in place while my colleagues avoided eye contact. The air felt thick with the scent of betrayal and expensive jasmine extract. While you were off playing with flowers in Tokyo, the company needed someone reliable, Terrence announced, his voice carrying across the lab. Phoebe has graciously accepted the head perfumer position. 6 months of intensive training under Master Hanako Yamamoto, one of the last practitioners of ancient Japanese aromatic techniques, rendered meaningless in a single sentence. 7 years of research, overnight shifts, and innovative formulations, all dismissed as playing with flowers. Phoebe stood beside Terrence, wearing a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary. She'd been with the company for exactly 14 weeks. Her previous experience consisted of a basic cosmetics certification and being Terrence's brother's daughter. The board unanimously approved my decision, Terrence continued, though I knew the board meant him and his 2 golf buddies. Phoebe has shown remarkable aptitude. Her signature scent will headline our collection at the International Fragrance Exhibition next month. I felt 20 pairs of eyes on me, waiting for my reaction. The promotion wasn't just a title. It was the culmination of a secret project our founder Ingrid had entrusted to me before her retirement. A revolutionary approach to fragrance that could transform our boutique house into a global phenomenon. Thanks to your absence, family comes first around here, Terrence added, arms crossed, a smirk playing on his thin lips. I smiled back, not the reaction he expected. What's so amusing? He demanded, nostrils flaring. Nothing, I replied softly, just thinking about the promotion you gave away. His eyes narrowed slightly. The position needed to be filled immediately. Phoebe graciously decided to stay in town rather than take that opportunity in Milan. My gaze shifted to Phoebe, who was examining her manicure. Milan had never shown interest in her. I knew, because I had contacts throughout the industry who would have mentioned such an offer. I look forward to seeing your creation, Phoebe, I said. Master Yamamoto always emphasized that balance is everything in fragrance. Those old techniques are outdated, she replied with a dismissive wave. Modern perfumery is about impact, not balance. That single statement confirmed everything. She had no idea what she was doing. Terrence clapped his hands. Excellent. Veda, you'll be assisting Phoebe with the final preparations for the exhibition. Your experience will be valuable, even if you weren't right for the leadership role. The laboratory slowly returned to work as Terrence led Phoebe to what should have been my office. As they walked away, I overheard him say, "Don't worry about Veda. She's all theory, no practical sense." My colleague Dimitri approached cautiously. "I'm sorry, Veda. Everyone knows you deserve that position." "It's fine," I replied, removing my lab coat. "Excuse me a moment." I walked to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and pressed my forehead against the cool metal door. 7 years of dedication, countless weekends sacrificed. The careful building of relationships with suppliers to source the rarest ingredients. The meticulous documentation of every experiment. The gentle guidance of junior team members. All of it, handed to Phoebe because her last name matched Terrence's family tree. I took 3 deep breaths, detecting the subtle notes of cleaning solution, hand soap, and fear. My fear. Not of failure, but of what I might do next. Because what Terrence didn't understand was that the promotion he'd given away wasn't just any position. What Phoebe didn't realize was that the formulations she was now in charge of weren't just pleasant scents. What neither of them knew was that, in Tokyo, I hadn't just learned techniques, I'd uncovered secrets. Secrets about how certain molecular combinations could influence human perception and behavior. Secrets that, in the wrong hands, could lead to disaster. And Phoebe's hands were very wrong indeed. I splashed water on my face and stared at my reflection. The woman looking back had changed. 6 months in Tokyo had transformed me. I was no longer just a talented perfumer. I was something else entirely. I straightened my shoulders and dried my hands. As I reached for the door, I made my decision. Terrence had no idea what he'd just done. Neither did Phoebe, but they were about to find out. If this story has captured your attention, please consider giving it a like and subscribing for more. Your support helps me continue crafting these tales of determination and justice. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had something you worked hard for taken away unfairly. I read every comment and would love to hear your experiences. My name is Veda Chandler, and until 6 months ago, I was the deputy perfumer at Alchemy Essentials, a boutique fragrance house known for its innovative, natural scents. I've always had what my grandmother called a witch's nose, able to identify and separate individual scents from the most complex bouquets. When other children were drawing with crayons, I was categorizing the distinct waxy notes of each color. I joined Alchemy 7 years ago with a biochemistry degree and a passion for transforming molecules into emotions. While other perfumers created pleasant fragrances, I created experiences, scents that transported you to specific memories or feelings. This gift caught the attention of Ingrid Northwood, our founder and a legend in the fragrance world. Ingrid became my mentor, recognizing something in me that others missed. She wasn't interested in commercial success alone. She believed fragrances could do more than smell nice. They could heal, inspire, and transform. 3 years into my tenure, Ingrid shared a secret with me. Veda, she said, her voice soft in her private lab. Throughout history, certain master perfumers discovered that specific molecular combinations could influence human perception and behavior. Not in a mystical way, but through neurological pathways. The ancient temples used these techniques in their ceremonies. She showed me delicate scrolls and worn journals, her collection of fragrance history that few had ever seen. Modern science is only beginning to understand what ancient masters knew intuitively, she continued. Certain scent molecules can trigger specific responses in the brain, feelings of trust, alertness, calm, or even subtle anxiety. Over the next 4 years, Ingrid and I worked quietly on what she called the Harmony Project, a revolutionary approach to fragrance that went beyond pleasant smells to create beneficial sensory experiences. We conducted careful research, documenting every experiment and discovery. As Ingrid prepared for retirement, she arranged for me to train with Master Hanako Yamamoto in Tokyo, one of the last practitioners of these ancient techniques. This knowledge is powerful, Ingrid warned before I left. It must be used with respect and precision. One molecule out of balance can transform a beneficial scent into something quite different. Terrence had been appointed interim CEO after Ingrid's retirement. He was a marketing executive who knew nothing about fragrance creation but plenty about profit margins. He reluctantly approved my Tokyo training but made it clear he considered it an unnecessary expense. In Tokyo, Master Hanako taught me that the most powerful fragrances worked through subtle influence, not overwhelming force. The Western approach is often too direct, she explained as we worked. They create scents that shout. We create scents that whisper directly to the brain. I learned techniques for formulating molecules that could induce specific states of mind, clarifying focus, enhancing empathy, alleviating anxiety. But I also learned the dangers of imbalance, how the same molecular structures, when improperly formulated, could induce opposite effects. Balance is everything, Master Hanako emphasized daily. Respect the power you hold. When I returned from Tokyo last week, I discovered chaos at Alchemy. Terrence had accelerated the timeline for our signature collection launch to coincide with the International Fragrance Exhibition, FS, just 4 weeks away. And now, Phoebe, with her 14 weeks of experience, was in charge of the entire project. After the announcement of Phoebe's promotion, Dimitri filled me in on what had happened during my absence. She changes formulations without testing, he whispered as we worked in the lab. She doubles concentrations because she thinks scents should be stronger. She ignores safety protocols because they're too slow. Has anyone seen her actual work? I asked. Terrence won't allow criticism, Dimitri replied. Last week, Alexis suggested additional testing for Phoebe's signature scent, and Terrence removed her from the exhibition team. That evening, I stayed late, ostensibly to catch up on missed work. Once everyone had left, I carefully examined Phoebe's formulation notebooks. What I found terrified me. Phoebe had taken our delicate, balanced formulations and brutalized them. She'd increased potent compounds to dangerous levels, mixed incompatible molecules, and ignored crucial stabilizing agents. Her signature scent, the one Terrence planned to feature prominently at the exhibition, contained exactly the combinations Master Hanako had warned against. In a controlled environment like our lab, the problems weren't obvious. But under exhibition conditions, warm rooms, hundreds of people, changing humidity, these imbalances could trigger reactions ranging from headaches to acute anxiety. I sat back, stunned by the potential disaster looming. Buyers, critics, and industry leaders would all be exposed to these unstable compounds. The reputation Ingrid had built over decades could be destroyed in an evening. I had three options: tell Terrence, who wouldn't listen, quit in protest, which wouldn't help anyone, or find another way. The next morning, Phoebe summoned me to her new office, my intended office. "Terrence says you should assist me," she said without looking up from her phone. "I need you to prepare sample vials of my signature scent for the exhibition preview." "Of course," I replied. "May I review your final formulation first? Sometimes certain compounds require special handling for events." She shrugged and pushed a notebook toward me. "Whatever. Just make sure it smells exactly like my prototype. Terrence says this scent will define the company's future." On that point, at least, we agreed. Over the next 3 weeks, I became Phoebe's shadow. I offered suggestions that she mostly ignored. I pointed out potential issues that she dismissed. I recommended standard testing that she called paranoid. But I also gained her trust by praising her creativity and supporting her in front of Terrence. Gradually, she began allowing me more involvement in the final preparations, particularly for her signature scent, which she'd named Dominance. An appropriate name, though not in the way she intended. 2 days before the exhibition, disaster struck. During a final formulation session, Phoebe accidentally knocked over a bottle of essential compound, losing half our prepared stock of her signature scent. "What am I going to do?" She panicked, looking at the spreading liquid on the floor. "The exhibition is in 2 days. We need at least 50 sample vials." "I can help," I offered calmly. "I've memorized your formulation. If you handle the other preparations, I can recreate this batch overnight." Relief washed over her face. "You'd do that? Even after?" "We're on the same team," I assured her. "The company's success is what matters." She left me alone in the lab with full access to all ingredients and her complete trust. That night, I worked methodically, carefully adjusting the formulation of Dominance. I didn't sabotage it, not exactly. I simply restored balance to certain molecules while subtly modifying others. The changes would be undetectable in the lab environment but would reveal themselves under specific conditions. Conditions exactly like those at a crowded exhibition hall. As dawn broke, I sealed the last sample vial and prepared detailed notes on proper handling of the fragrance. Phoebe would never read them, but they would provide important documentation later. When she arrived that morning, I presented her with the completed work. "You're a lifesaver," she exclaimed, examining a vial. "It smells perfect. Just doing my job," I replied. "Remember, fragrance is all about balance," she laughed. "You and your balance. This is going to blow everyone away." Again, we agreed, though for entirely different reasons. The day of the International Fragrance Exhibition arrived. The Grand Hall was transformed into a sensory wonderland, with booths from every major fragrance house worldwide. Alchemy's display was prominently positioned near the entrance. Terrence had paid extra for the prime location. Our booth featured elegant glass displays of 5 fragrances, with Dominance positioned center stage. The marketing materials praised it as a revolutionary approach to modern fragrance and the future of alchemy essentials. Terrence arrived in an expensive suit, Phoebe beside him in a designer dress. They both ignored me as I quietly arranged the sample vials and prepared the diffusers. "The buyers from Nordica Luxury Group are coming at 7, Terrence instructed Phoebe. "Their order alone could double our annual revenue. Make sure they get the full experience of your creation." As industry elites began filling the hall, the temperature rose steadily. Humidity increased with each additional body. Exactly the conditions needed for what was about to happen. Phoebe began enthusiastically spraying her signature scent for anyone who approached our booth. For the first hour, everything seemed fine. The scent was pleasant enough in small doses and initial exposure. But as the molecules dispersed throughout the warm, humid environment, they began to transform, just as Master Hanako had taught me they would. The first sign that something was wrong came from a renowned critic who had been hovering near our booth for several minutes. She wrinkled her nose and stepped back, consulting her notes with a confused expression. "Is there something else being diffused nearby?" she asked, looking around. "I'm getting an unusual undertone." Phoebe laughed nervously. "That's just the complexity of my creation. Many layers reveal themselves over time." The critic nodded uncertainly and moved to a neighboring booth. Within 30 minutes, a pattern emerged. People would approach our display with interest, spend a few moments sampling the fragrances, then inexplicably drift away with vague excuses. Some rubbed their temples, others loosened their collars. A respected buyer from Paris circled back after leaving our area. "There's something distinctive about this scent," she said, struggling to find the right words. "It reminds me of something, but I can't place it." What she couldn't articulate was that the scent was triggering a subtle neurological response, a barely perceptible feeling of unease. Not enough to recognize consciously, but sufficient to make people instinctively want to distance themselves. Phoebe, growing increasingly desperate as potential buyers kept drifting away, began spraying more of her signature scent into the air. This only intensified the effect. "I don't understand," she whispered to Terrence. "Everyone loved it in the office tests." Terrence's confident smile had faltered. The Nordica representatives were due in 20 minutes, and our booth was noticeably less crowded than our competitors. "Use the diffusers," he commanded. "Maybe people just need more exposure." I watched silently as Phoebe activated the electronic diffusers, releasing a steady stream of dominance into our area. The molecular concentration in the air increased, pushing the effect from subtle unease to something more pronounced. A jewelry designer from the adjacent booth approached Terrence. "I don't mean to intrude, but is there something wrong with your fragrance? My clients are asking if there's a problem with the ventilation in this section." Terrence glared at her. "Absolutely not. This is a revolutionary scent created by our head perfumer." "Well, it's making people uncomfortable," she persisted. "Several have mentioned feeling anxious or getting headaches." As if to confirm her point, a journalist nearby suddenly pressed his hand to his forehead and quickly walked toward the exit. Panic flashed across Terrence's face. He turned to Phoebe. "What's happening?" "I don't know," she hissed. "It smelled perfect in the lab." The exhibition director was now approaching our booth, accompanied by two concerned-looking staff members. In the background, I noticed several attendees pointing in our direction while speaking to security personnel. "Mr. Harrison," the director addressed Terrence formally, "we've received multiple complaints about irritation coming from your display area. If there's a problem with your samples—" "There is no problem," Terrence insisted, his voice rising. "This is sabotage from our competitors." The director looked skeptical. "Nevertheless, if the complaints continue, we'll need to shut down your booth for safety reasons." As he walked away, Terrence rounded on his staff. "Find out what's happening. Now." Dmitri cautiously approached with a testing strip. "The molecular structure seems to be changing in this environment. The base notes are intensifying inappropriately." "That's impossible," Phoebe snapped. "I followed all the standard protocols." This was my moment. I stepped forward. "May I?" Without waiting for permission, I took the testing strip from Dmitri and examined it carefully. The heat and humidity are destabilizing certain molecules in the formulation. "This combination," I pointed to a specific compound in Phoebe's notes, "becomes volatile under these conditions." "How would you know that?" Phoebe demanded. "It's one of the primary principles taught in Tokyo," I replied calmly. Master Yamamoto emphasized that certain molecular combinations must be balanced with stabilizing agents, especially for public exhibitions where environmental factors can't be controlled. The color drained from Phoebe's face as understanding dawned. She hadn't just created a bad fragrance, she had created an actively problematic one. And now, hundreds of industry professionals were experiencing the results. Terrence looked between us, desperation evident in his eyes. The Nordica representatives had just entered the hall. "Can you fix it?" he asked me, his earlier smugness entirely gone. I hesitated, allowing the moment to stretch. "Possibly," I would need to introduce a counteracting agent to neutralize the problematic compounds. Do it, he ordered. Whatever you need. I'll need access to the reserve ingredients in our supply case, I said, an authorization from the exhibition director to diffuse a neutralizing agent throughout this section. Terrence immediately pulled out his phone to call the director while Phoebe watched helplessly, her career crumbling before her eyes. I retrieved my personal case from beneath our display table, a special kit I had prepared specifically for this scenario. Inside were several vials of precisely formulated scents, each labeled with Japanese characters. The exhibition director arrived quickly, alarmed by the growing situation. "What exactly is happening here?" he demanded. I explained in technical terms how certain molecular combinations could become unstable under specific environmental conditions. I described the subtle neurological effects such compounds could trigger and emphasized that while uncomfortable, they weren't dangerous. "I've prepared a neutralizing agent," I concluded, holding up a crystal vial containing an amber liquid. "It will stabilize the existing compounds and eliminate the negative effects." The director, a former chemist himself, nodded in understanding. "How quickly will it work?" "Almost immediately," I assured him. "The molecules are designed to bind with and transform the problematic compounds." With his authorization, I uncapped the vial and carefully added its contents to the exhibition hall's central diffusion system. Within minutes, the subtle atmosphere of anxiety began to dissipate. People who had been avoiding our section gradually returned, their expressions relaxing. What they were experiencing now was the true art I had learned in Tokyo, a perfectly balanced composition that created a sense of mental clarity and emotional calm. Not overpowering, not manipulative, but gently supportive of the natural human state. The Nordica representatives, who had been waiting cautiously at the periphery, finally approached our booth. "What exactly happened here?" their lead buyer asked Terrence. Before he could fabricate an explanation, I stepped forward. "A valuable lesson in the importance of proper training and respect for ancient techniques. The original formulation was unbalanced, but now you're experiencing what our founder always envisioned: fragrances that enhance rather than overwhelm." I explained the principles behind what they were now experiencing, how certain molecules could support cognitive clarity and emotional balance when properly formulated. "This is remarkable," the buyer said, closing her eyes to better experience the scent. "It's subtle, yet effective. I feel more focused, more present." "That's exactly the intention," I replied. "Our founder believed fragrance should be a supportive presence, not an aggressive one." For the next hour, I became the de facto representative of Alchemy Essentials. Critics, buyers, and even competitors gathered to hear about the techniques I had learned in Tokyo. I shared just enough to fascinate without revealing the carefully guarded secrets of Master Hanako's teaching. Terrence stood to the side, watching as industry leaders who had previously ignored him now engaged enthusiastically with me. Phoebe had disappeared entirely, too humiliated to face the crowd. The Nordica representatives, impressed by both the recovered situation and my knowledge, requested a private meeting for the following morning. "We're interested in an exclusive arrangement," their lead buyer whispered to me. "Not with just anyone at Alchemy, but specifically with you." As the exhibition drew to a close, the director approached with several board members from the International Fragrance Association. "That was quite a demonstration," he said. "Intentional or not, you've given us all a powerful lesson in respect for fragrance chemistry." "Some lessons need to be experienced to be truly understood," I replied. After the attendees had departed, I found Terrence sitting alone in our disheveled booth, tie loosened and expression grim. "The board chairman called," he said without looking up. "There's an emergency meeting tomorrow morning." "I assumed there would be," I replied, packing my materials. "You knew this would happen," he said. "It wasn't a question. I knew an unbalanced formulation would become problematic under exhibition conditions. Yes, any properly trained perfumer would have known that. You could have prevented it. You could have corrected Phoebe's work beforehand." I paused, meeting his gaze directly. "The way you prevented a qualified professional from receiving the position she earned? The way you corrected your mistake of appointing an unqualified family member to a critical role?" He had no response. "See you at the board meeting," I said, walking away. That night, I received 3 calls. One from Master Hanako checking on the demonstration, one from Ingrid who had heard about the exhibition from her industry contacts, and one from the board chairman requesting all my documentation on the Harmony project. I slept peacefully for the first time since returning from Tokyo. The board meeting began at 8 the following morning. I arrived early with a comprehensive presentation, my training certificates from Tokyo, detailed notes on the Harmony project spanning 7 years, correspondence with Ingrid confirming her intentions for my role upon return, and complete documentation of the molecular issues with Phoebe's formulations. Terrence arrived minutes before the meeting began, Phoebe notably absent, the boardroom filled with senior executives and major shareholders, many of whom I'd never met. The chairman called the meeting to order with a grave expression. Yesterday's incident at the International Fragrance Exhibition has created significant concern, he began. Our company was publicly embarrassed, and preliminary reports suggest negligence in our quality control processes. Terrence immediately launched into a defense, blaming unusual environmental conditions and suggesting that competitors might have interfered with our display. The chairman let him finish, then turned to me. Ms. Chandler, would you please explain exactly what happened yesterday from a technical perspective? For the next 30 minutes, I walked the board through the science of molecular stability in fragrance compounds. I explained how certain combinations required specific balancing agents, particularly in uncontrolled environments. I detailed the neurological pathways through which fragrances influenced perception and behavior. I never directly accused Phoebe or Terrence of incompetence. I didn't need to. The technical evidence spoke for itself. When I finished, the chairman nodded thoughtfully. And the recovery? The neutralizing agent you used was quite effective, according to multiple reports. That was an application of the techniques I studied in Tokyo, I explained. Master Hanako's teachings emphasize harmony and balance, principles our founder also valued deeply. The chairman turned to Terrence. Did you review Ms. Chandler's training reports from Tokyo before making staffing decisions? Terrence shifted uncomfortably. Those reports weren't relevant to operational needs. The company required immediate leadership in the perfumer position. Interesting, the chairman replied, because we have here a letter from Ingrid Northwood, dated before her retirement, explicitly stating that the Tokyo training was the final preparation for Ms. Chandler to assume the head perfumer role upon her return. He held up a document I had never seen. Furthermore, we have confirmation that Nordica Luxury Group has offered an exclusive contract with Alchemy Essentials, contingent specifically on Ms. Chandler leading the fragrance development team. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. The board has reached a decision, the chairman continued. Effective immediately, Veda Chandler will assume the position of head perfumer and creative director for Alchemy Essentials, with full authority over all fragrance development. He turned to Terrence. Mr. Harrison will transition to regional sales director, focusing on our existing product lines in secondary markets. Terrence's face flushed dark red. This is outrageous. One incident doesn't. This isn't about one incident, the chairman interrupted. This is about respecting the vision of our founder and recognizing exceptional talent. The board vote was unanimous. He stood, effectively ending the discussion. Ms. Chandler, please prepare a complete recovery plan by the end of the week. The rest of you, thank you for your time. As the board members filed out, many stopped to congratulate me. Terrence remained seated, staring at the table as his career imploded around him. When we were alone, he finally looked up. You planned this from the beginning. You let Phoebe fail spectacularly to prove a point. No, I corrected him. I simply allowed natural consequences to unfold. Phoebe was never qualified for the position, something you knew but ignored. I didn't sabotage her work. I just didn't prevent the inevitable failure her inexperience would cause. I gathered my materials. The difference between us, Terrence, is that I understand the power of balance in molecules, in business relationships, in justice. He glared at me. So this was your revenge? Humiliating me and ruining my niece's career? I smiled slightly. This wasn't revenge. This was restoration. There's an important distinction. As I walked toward the door, I paused. Oh, and Terrence? Master Hanako taught me that the true measure of power isn't in what you take, but in what you create. I've just created a future for alchemy that honors its past, while embracing innovation. What have you created lately, besides nepotism? I didn't wait for his response. There was too much work to do. A revolutionary fragrance line to develop, ancient techniques to honor, and a legacy to build. 3 months later, our Harmony collection debuted to international acclaim. The carefully balanced formulations created subtle but profound experiences for wearers: clarity, confidence, tranquility. Industry publications praised the revolutionary approach that transforms fragrance from accessory to essential companion. Terrence eventually left for a position at a budget cosmetics brand. Phoebe, humbled by the experience, enrolled in a proper perfumery school in Grasse, where she would spend years learning the foundations she had arrogantly dismissed. And me? I received a handwritten note from Master Hanako that simply read, "Balance achieved." The most satisfying revenge isn't destruction, but reconstruction. Not in taking something away, but in creating something better. Not in burning bridges, but in building new paths that lead exactly where you were always meant to go. If you enjoyed this story of justice finally being served, please hit the like button and subscribe for more tales of persistence and triumph. Have you ever had to watch someone unqualified take a position you deserved? Share your experience in the comments. I find that sometimes the sweetest victory comes from simply being patient, while incompetence reveals itself naturally. Your support means everything to storytellers like me.
The projector hummed quietly as my presentation reached its crescendo. 12 international investors leaned forward in their chairs, captivated by the quarterly growth charts displayed on the screen. These weren't just impressive numbers, they were revolutionary for our industry. I could see genuine interest in their eyes as I explained how our manufacturing process would transform their market. As you can see from these metrics, I said, gesturing to the screen, we've managed to increase efficiency by 37% while simultaneously reducing material waste. This isn't theoretical. These are actual results from the pilot program I developed last year. I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. Normally, I'd ignore it during a presentation this crucial, but we were expecting confirmation on shipping logistics that these clients needed to hear about. I apologized and glanced discreetly at the screen. The message made my throat close. Your position has been eliminated effective immediately. Finish the meeting and clear your desk by 5 p.m., Dominic. My fingers went numb. The room blurred momentarily as I tried to process what I was reading. 6 months of strange behavior from Dominic suddenly crystallized into perfect clarity. The way he'd started excluding me from strategy meetings, how he'd been asking increasingly detailed questions about my process documentation, the casual request to share my client contact information. I must have visibly faltered because Irina, the lead investor, leaned forward with concern in her eyes. Everything okay? My phone screen was still illuminated, the message clearly visible. I watched as her gaze flicked down to it, then back to my face. Her expression shifted from concern to something more calculating. Is there something we should know? She asked quietly. The other investors were watching now, the atmosphere in the room transforming from enthusiastic to uncertain in seconds. In that moment, something inside me, something that had been bending for months, finally snapped clean. I placed my phone face up on the table. Actually, I said, feeling strangely calm, there is something you should know about this company. I turned to face the projection screen, where my carefully crafted presentation still displayed our success metrics. These growth numbers are genuine. What's not included in your information packets is that they came from my pilot program, one that uses sustainable materials from local suppliers, not the overseas manufacturers listed in your proposal. The investors exchanged glances. I pulled up a new slide, one not included in the official deck. These are the actual supply chain costs, I continued, pointing to figures significantly lower than what they'd seen in their packets. The difference has been systematically diverted elsewhere for the past year. The conference room door burst open. Dominic stood there, his face flushed red. There's been a terrible misunderstanding, but it was too late. The investors had seen enough. If you're enjoying this story so far, I'd love your support. Hit that like button, subscribe to hear more stories like this one, and drop a comment about what you think is going to happen next. Trust me, this is just the beginning. and you'll want to stick around for what comes next. My name is Victoria, and until approximately 40 seconds ago, I was the innovation director at what many considered the most promising manufacturing startup in the Northeast. My friends call me Tori, though not many people get close enough for that privilege. I've always been cautious with trust, a trait that served me well today. I graduated top of my class in chemical engineering and material science. While my classmates chased positions at massive corporations, I specifically targeted smaller companies where I could have genuine impact. When Dominic recruited me 2 years ago, he promised exactly that, the freedom to revolutionize our industry with sustainable practices. We're building something different here, he'd said during my interview, green eyes alight with what I mistook for authentic passion. Most companies talk about sustainability as a marketing gimmick. I want it to be our foundation. Those words resonated with everything I believed in. I accepted his offer despite higher-paying opportunities elsewhere. The first year seemed to prove I'd made the right choice. Dominic gave me resources, autonomy, and recognition as I developed our key manufacturing innovations. The trouble began subtly. So subtly that for weeks I questioned whether I was imagining things. It started with Dominic asking me to add his name to my research reports. Just for internal documentation, he'd explained, since I'm overseeing the department. Then came the executive meetings I was suddenly not invited to. Just budget discussions, he assured me. Nothing relevant to your work. I noticed changes to my presentation materials before client meetings. Adjustments to cost projections, altered timelines. When questioned, Dominic would smile tightly, just making it more accessible for non-technical audiences. My project got renamed in company communications. My team members were reassigned one by one. My access to certain servers became temporarily unavailable due to security updates. I started keeping records after the 3rd month of strange occurrences. Nothing dramatic, just a private document detailing changes made to my work, conversations that seemed odd, decisions that didn't align with our supposed mission. 2 months ago, I overheard something that confirmed my suspicions. I was working late, the office mostly empty, when voices drifted from the conference room. Through the partially open door, I heard Dominic speaking with our finance director, Paula. The board is impressed with your innovation strategy, Paula said. Dominic chuckled. They should be. The sustainability angle was exactly what we needed to differentiate ourselves. And Victoria? Victoria is brilliant but naive. She genuinely believes we're saving the planet while making money. Perfect for developing the technology, but she doesn't understand the bigger picture. Which is? We use her innovations to attract premium investment, then scale with traditional manufacturing once we've secured market position. The margins are incomparable. And when she realizes, by then we'll have everything we need from her. Innovation directors are replaceable, especially ones who don't own their intellectual property. I slipped away before they could discover me, my mind racing. That night, I reviewed my employment contract with devastating clarity. The standard IP clause I'd barely noticed when signing suddenly revealed its true purpose. Anything I developed belonged to the company. But there was one thing Dominic didn't know. One crucial detail he'd overlooked. During grad school, I'd specialized in intellectual property law alongside engineering, a unique combination born from watching my professor's solar technology stolen by a corporate partner. I'd learned then that contracts have limitations, and timing is everything. I spent the next weeks preparing, documenting every alteration to my work, tracking the financial discrepancies between reported costs and actual expenses. Most importantly, researching the investors scheduled for today's presentation. Which brings us back to this moment, with Dominic standing in the doorway, his face contorted with panic, and 12 investors looking between us with growing concern. Victoria, Dominic said, voice tight with forced calm, you're clearly upset about some organizational changes. Let's discuss this privately rather than confusing our guests with incomplete information. Incomplete information? I repeated softly. Interesting choice of words. I turned back to the investors. What, mister? Dominic isn't telling you is that the manufacturing process you're investing in, the one that reduces costs while maintaining sustainability, exists solely because I developed it against company directive. That's preposterous, Dominic sputtered, moving toward me. I held up my hand. The difference between the actual production costs and what's listed in your packets represents approximately $12 million in missing funds. funds that have been consistently misreported in quarterly statements. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. The silent man in the corner, who hadn't introduced himself at the meeting's start, finally spoke. "These are serious allegations, miss?" "Victoria," I supplied. "And they're not allegations, they're documented facts." "She's distraught," Dominic cut in. "We were planning to restructure her department, and clearly the news has come as a shock." The man in the corner stood slowly. "Actually, Dominic, I think we need to hear everything Victoria has to say." Dominic's face paled. "And who exactly are you?" The man produced a business card and placed it on the table. "Gregory Lambert, Securities and Exchange Commission, Enforcement Division." As Dominic stared in horror, Irina cleared her throat. "And I represent the International Trade Commission. We've had your company on our watch list for some time." My pulse raced as I watched Dominic's carefully constructed world begin to crumble. He lunged toward my laptop, but two investors blocked his path. "Don't worry," I said calmly. "I've already shared the complete presentation with everyone in this room." Dominic's face drained of color as he looked around the room, suddenly realizing this wasn't simply a pitch meeting but something far more calculated. His confidence visibly crumbled as he processed that his career might be ending in real time. "This is absurd," he stammered, straightening his tie with shaking fingers. "Victoria has clearly misunderstood some internal communications. We were restructuring her department, not eliminating her position." Gregory from the SEC remained standing. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion with your legal team present." "Absolutely," Dominic replied, too quickly. "Let me reschedule this presentation for next week after we've cleared up this unfortunate misunderstanding." Irina shook her head. "I think we've seen enough to warrant immediate attention." She turned to me. "Victoria, you mentioned discrepancies in the supply chain reporting. Can you elaborate?" I nodded, clicking to the next slide in my presentation. One Dominic had never seen. This chart shows the actual materials cost from our local suppliers compared to what's been reported to investors and the board. The room grew intensely quiet as numbers appeared on screen. The green bars represent actual costs, documented through original invoices I've preserved. The blue bars show what was reported in official financial statements. As you can see, there's a consistent 35% inflation across all categories. Gregory pulled out a notebook. "And where did the difference go?" "Initially, I couldn't trace it," I admitted. "But 3 weeks ago, I discovered something interesting." I clicked to another slide showing a bank statement. This account was opened 6 months ago under the name of a shell company called Helios Manufacturing. The address matches a property Dominic purchased last year. "This is outrageous," Dominic shouted, his composed facade completely shattered. "You hacked into private accounts. That's illegal." "Actually," I countered calmly, "I received this statement by accident. It was misdirected to my email instead of Paula's because our company addresses differ by a single letter. I simply opened an attachment sent to me." Gregory raised an eyebrow at Dominic. "Is Paula your finance director?" Dominic's silence was answer enough. "Victoria," Irina asked, "when did you first suspect financial irregularities?" I took a deep breath, aware that everything I said next would be scrutinized in whatever investigation followed. 4 months ago, I noticed discrepancies between my original budget proposals and the final versions presented to clients. When I raised concerns, I was told it was standard markup, which would be normal business practice, Dominic interjected desperately. "Except," I continued, "the markup wasn't being reported as profit. It was listed as production costs, which artificially inflated our expense reports while creating a slush fund no one could track." The conference room door opened again. A security guard appeared, looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Dominic asked me to escort Miss Victoria from the building," he explained hesitantly. Gregory turned to the guard. "I'm with the Securities and Exchange Commission conducting an inquiry. Miss Victoria will be staying." The guard's eyes widened. He nodded quickly and backed out of the room. Dominic's breathing had become shallow and rapid. "This is a setup. She planned this." "Yes," I interrupted. "I did plan this. Just like you planned to steal my work, take credit for my innovations, and then discard me once you'd extracted everything valuable." I turned to the investors. 2 months ago, I discovered Dominic had filed patent applications for my technologies, listing himself as the primary inventor and me as a minor contributor. The filing dates were backdated to precede my employment. One of the investors, a silver-haired woman who'd been quietly observing, finally spoke. I'm Eleanor with Brightline Capital. We've been considering a significant investment in your company specifically because of these innovations. She turned to Dominic. Were you aware that Victoria had already filed provisional patents 9 months ago as part of her graduate work? Dominic's expression shifted from panic to confusion. That's impossible. Our legal team verified. Your legal team verified what you told them. I clarified. The foundational work for these processes was documented in my thesis. I filed provisionals before joining the company. That's why I was comfortable signing your employment agreement. The core intellectual property was already protected. The room erupted in murmurs. Dominic lunged toward me, but 2 men intercepted him. You think you've won? He hissed, his charming facade completely gone. You have no idea who you're dealing with. The board will never believe you over me. They won't have to, Gregory stated flatly. The evidence speaks for itself. As security escorted Dominic out, I felt a strange hollowness replace the adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation. Years of work, countless late nights, all the passion I'd poured into these innovations, and it had nearly been stolen with a simple text message. The meeting dissolved into organized chaos as Gregory began collecting statements and contact information from everyone present. Irina approached me privately. That took extraordinary courage, she said, but this is just the beginning of a complicated process. Are you prepared for what comes next? I nodded, though truthfully, I had no idea what awaited me. I couldn't let him take everything. Whistleblowers often pay a steep price, she warned, particularly when exposing someone as well-connected as Dominic. Her words sent a chill through me. Well, connected? I thought he was just ambitious. Irina's expression turned grave. Dominic didn't build this company alone. He has powerful partners who won't appreciate this public embarrassment. As the investors filed out, I gathered my materials, my mind racing. The victory I'd imagined suddenly felt incomplete, perhaps even dangerous. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every noise outside my apartment made me jump. Dominic's final words echoed in my thoughts. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I reviewed my options until dawn broke. By morning, I'd made a decision. I couldn't undo what I'd started, but I could prepare for whatever came next. I called my former graduate advisor, Professor Lin, who had warned me about Dominic when I first mentioned his job offer. You were right about him, I admitted when she answered. I wish I hadn't been, she replied. Where are you now? My apartment, but I don't think I should stay here. Come to the university. My office. 1 hour. Professor Lin had spent 20 years in industry before turning to academia. She'd seen brilliance stolen, credit misappropriated, and innovations buried to protect existing products. When I arrived at her office, she was already making calls. Victoria needs protection, she said into the phone. Not just legal, actual protection. After a pause, she added, because Dominic Vega doesn't operate alone. He's the charming face for investors, but Archer pulls his strings. My blood went cold. Archer? As in Hudson Archer? Hudson Archer was legendary in our industry, a pioneer who'd transformed manufacturing in the 1990s before expanding into technology, energy, and private equity. His name appeared on buildings at 3 universities. His foundation funded research worldwide. Professor Lin ended her call and turned to me. You've stepped into something bigger than a dishonest boss, Victoria. Dominic was installed as CEO because of his charisma and technical background. Archer Capital provides the funding and connections that make everything possible. But why would someone like Hudson Archer need to steal my work? He could fund research teams worldwide. Because what you've developed threatens his existing investments. Your manufacturing process makes half his portfolio obsolete. It's more profitable to control your innovation than compete with it. I sank into a chair, the magnitude of my situation finally hitting me. What do I do now? Professor Lin's expression softened. What you've always done, be smarter than they expect. For the next week, I moved between temporary accommodations, never staying anywhere more than a night. News of the investigation broke in industry publications, though my name wasn't mentioned. Dominic had been placed on administrative leave pending an internal review. The board of directors called me for an emergency meeting. Through my newly hired attorney, I agreed to meet at a neutral location. The temporary conference room felt sterile and tense as 5 board members filed in. I recognized only 2, Paul Winters, the chairman, and Teresa Gale, head of the finance committee. Their expressions revealed nothing as they took their seats across from me and my attorney. Paul spoke first. Miss Victoria, we want to thank you for bringing these issues to light. The board takes allegations of financial impropriety very seriously. I nodded but remained silent. However, he continued, we're concerned about the manner in which this information was disclosed. Bringing external parties into a sensitive internal matter has created significant complications. My attorney, Elena, replied before I could. My client attempted to address these concerns internally for months. She was systematically ignored and ultimately terminated for her efforts. There's no record of any formal complaints, Teresa countered. I opened my laptop. I've brought copies of 17 emails sent to leadership over the past 6 months, each flagging discrepancies in financial reporting or raising concerns about intellectual property protection. We never received these, Paul insisted. Perhaps because Dominic maintained exclusive control over board communications, I suggested, but I anticipated that possibility, which is why every email was blind, copied to my personal account, and time-stamped. The room grew uncomfortably quiet. What exactly do you want, Victoria? Teresa finally asked. I want what I've always wanted, to see my work used to create sustainable manufacturing practices that benefit everyone, not just wealthy shareholders. Paul leaned forward. Let me be direct. The company is prepared to offer you a generous settlement with a non-disclosure agreement. You would be compensated for any inconvenience while allowing us to handle this matter discreetly. Elena smiled thinly. My client isn't interested in being silenced. The alternative could be unpleasant for everyone, Teresa warned. Lengthy litigation drains resources and damages reputations, often for all parties involved. Is that a threat? I asked quietly. It's reality, Paul replied. We have significant resources and an obligation to protect the company's interests. I closed my laptop. So do I. As we prepared to leave, Paul made one final attempt. Victoria, you should know that Hudson Archer has taken a personal interest in resolving this situation. He's suggested meeting with you directly. The mention of his name was meant to intimidate me. Instead, it confirmed everything Professor Lin had told me. Hudson Archer wouldn't involve himself in a minor dispute unless he had significant skin in the game. I'll consider it, I replied neutrally. Outside the building, Elena gripped my arm. Be careful about meeting Archer. Men like him don't achieve that level of power by playing fair. I know, I assured her, but sometimes you need to get closer to danger before you can neutralize it. That evening, my phone rang with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. A smooth, measured voice spoke. Miss Victoria? Hudson Archer here. I believe we should talk. My pulse quickened at the sound of Hudson Archer's voice. This was the man who controlled billion-dollar industries, whose name appeared in business headlines and on university buildings. And now he was calling me directly. I appreciate you reaching out, I said, keeping my voice measured despite my racing heart. Though I'm surprised the chairman of Archer Capital gets involved in operational disputes at portfolio companies. A low chuckle came through the line. When something threatens multiple investments simultaneously, I make exceptions. His tone was casual, as though we were discussing the weather rather than my professional future. Would you be willing to meet tomorrow? My private office downtown. Every instinct told me this was dangerous. Yet refusing wasn't an option if I wanted to understand what I was truly up against. I'll be there, I agreed, with my attorney. That won't be necessary, Archer replied smoothly. Just a friendly conversation between colleagues. Nevertheless, she'll be joining me. A pause. As you wish. 3 o'clock tomorrow. My assistant will text you the address. After he hung up, I immediately called Elena and Professor Lin, putting them on a conference call to discuss strategy. He's trying to intimidate you, Elena warned. Men like Archer believe their reputation alone will make you back down. Professor Lin was more blunt. He'll offer you everything you think you want, then take twice as much in return. What choice do I have? I asked. If I refuse to meet, he'll just use other methods to pressure me. You always have choices, Victoria, Professor Lin said. But you need leverage, something he values more than silencing you. I stared out my window at the city lights, thinking about what Hudson Archer might value most. His reputation? His business empire? Then it hit me. His legacy, I whispered. Hudson Archer is 73 years old. He's been giving commencement speeches about innovation and progress for decades. What if the final chapter of his story is stealing ideas and crushing true innovation to protect outdated investments? Elena caught on immediately. Public perception. That's what someone like him can't control with money alone. Exactly, I said, ideas crystallizing rapidly. And I think I know how to approach tomorrow's meeting. I spent the night researching everything about Hudson Archer, his companies, his public statements, his philanthropic work. By morning, I had a clearer picture of the man I was facing and what might move him. The address Archer's assistant sent led to an understated building in the financial district. No company name adorned the entrance, just a simple A etched in the glass doors. The security guard checked my ID, then directed me to a private elevator that required a keycard he provided. Elena squeezed my arm reassuringly as the elevator ascended. Remember, we walk, if anything feels wrong. Your safety matters more than any outcome. The doors opened to reveal a minimalist reception area with panoramic views of the city. A poised woman greeted us. Miss Victoria, Miss Elena, Mr. Archer is expecting you. She led us through double doors into a spacious office. Hudson Archer stood as we entered. In person, he projected more authority than his photos suggested, tall and lean with penetrating gray eyes that missed nothing. He wore a simple charcoal suit that probably cost more than my annual salary. Victoria, he said, extending his hand as though we were old friends. Thank you for coming. I shook it firmly. Mr. Archer. Hudson, please. He gestured to a seating area by the windows. Can I offer you anything? Coffee? Water? We both declined. His attempt at casual hospitality felt calculated, a power play to establish himself as the gracious host rather than an adversary. I've followed your career with interest, he said once we were seated. Your graduate work showed remarkable promise. I raised an eyebrow. My graduate work was hardly on the radar of someone like you. A slight smile. I fund research in sustainable manufacturing across 17 universities. Promising innovations don't escape my notice. He leaned forward. Which is why Dominic's actions are particularly disappointing. Rest assured, I knew nothing about his financial improprieties. Yet you're intervening now, Elena noted. Archer nodded. Because Victoria's work is too valuable to be lost in legal battles and public accusations. What Dominic attempted was wrong. Full stop. His direct acknowledgement surprised me. I'd expected denials or minimalizations. So what do you propose? I asked carefully. A fresh start. I'll personally ensure you receive full credit for your innovations. We'll restructure the company leadership. Your patents will remain yours, with an exclusive licensing arrangement that compensates you fairly. He named a figure that made me blink. Additionally, you'll have complete autonomy over the sustainable manufacturing division. It was everything I should have wanted. Recognition, compensation, control over my work's implementation. Yet something felt wrong, and in exchange I prompted discretion regarding the current investigation. We handle matters internally without further involvement from regulatory agencies. Elena shifted beside me. You're asking Victoria to potentially obstruct a federal investigation. Archer shook his head. I'm asking her to clarify that her concerns have been addressed satisfactorily. The regulators can focus their limited resources elsewhere. I studied him carefully. Why does this matter so much to you personally? This goes beyond protecting a portfolio company. For the first time, I saw a crack in his composed facade. Something flashed in his eyes. Concern, perhaps even fear. Your manufacturing process isn't just innovative, Victoria. It's revolutionary. It makes traditional methods obsolete virtually overnight. He gestured toward the city skyline. I have investments in 14 manufacturing companies that would face extinction if your technology spreads too quickly. So this is about protecting your investments, I concluded. It's about controlled transition, he corrected. Immediate disruption creates chaos, jobs lost, communities devastated. I'm proposing managed implementation that allows for adjustment. His argument made logical sense, but I'd done my research overnight. Interesting perspective from someone who made his initial fortune by aggressively disrupting the steel industry in the 90s, causing 3 major manufacturers to close within 18 months. Archer's expression hardened slightly. I've learned from past mistakes. Or you're protecting yourself now that you're on the other side, I countered. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Archer leaned back, studying me with new intensity. What do you want, Victoria? beyond what I've offered. Transparency, I replied immediately. No more shell companies or hidden ownership. Full disclosure to investors about how my technology actually works and what it means for existing manufacturing methods. He considered this. That would trigger market adjustments. Yes, I agreed. It would. I need time to reposition certain holdings first. Elena interjected. That sounds suspiciously like using insider information for trading advantage. Archer smiled thinly. I'm simply being practical. So am I said, reaching into my bag. I withdrew a thin folder and placed it on the table between us. This contains evidence that Archer Capital has been actively suppressing similar innovations from at least 3 other researchers over the past decade. Each case follows the same pattern, promising technology acquired through a subsidiary, then mysteriously shelved or restricted through exclusive patents. His face remained impressively neutral, but his hand tightened slightly on the armrest. Where did you get this information? Professor Lin has been tracking patterns of buried innovation for years. After Dominic's actions raised red flags, she connected some dots. For several long moments, Archer said nothing. Then, surprisingly, he smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his severe features. Claudia Lin. I should have known she'd be involved. He shook his head slightly. We were research partners 40 years ago before taking different paths. Different ethics, you mean? I corrected. Different perspectives on progress, he countered. Claudia believes in radical transparency regardless of consequences. I believe in measured transitions. He tapped the folder. This information could damage more than just me, Victoria. Thousands of jobs depend on stable markets. I'm not looking to create chaos, I assured him, just to ensure my work isn't buried like those others. The negotiation that followed lasted nearly 3 hours. Elena proved invaluable, catching subtle loopholes in Archer's proposed terms. By the time we reached a tentative agreement, the sun was setting over the city. Archer extended his hand again. I underestimated you, Victoria. That won't happen again. I certainly hope not, I replied, shaking his hand firmly. As Elena and I rode the elevator down, she whispered, Did we just negotiate with the devil? We negotiated with a businessman who forgot that innovation can't be controlled forever, I corrected her. And we got what we needed. The following weeks passed in a blur of legal documents, restructuring announcements, and carefully worded press releases. Dominic resigned to pursue other opportunities. The board appointed an interim CEO with a strong ethical reputation. Most importantly, my patents remained mine, with a licensing agreement that maintained my control over implementation. What no one except Elena and Professor Lin knew was that our agreement with Archer contained a hidden protection. If my technology was restricted or its rollout delayed beyond specific benchmarks, a trust would automatically release all Professor Lin's research on buried innovations to selected journalists and regulatory agencies. 6 months later, I stood on a manufacturing floor watching workers implement my process at full scale. A news crew filmed for a feature on sustainable industry innovations. The reporter turned to me. Your technology is being called revolutionary. Did you expect this level of impact when you developed it? I smiled, thinking of the path that had led here. I always believed in its potential. I'm just grateful it found the right home for proper implementation. What I didn't say was that the right home had emerged only after Hudson Archer reorganized his manufacturing holdings, divesting from companies that couldn't adapt and investing heavily in those that could. The market adjustment happened gradually enough to avoid chaos, but decisively enough to create genuine change. The text message that had shattered my world that day in the conference room ultimately forced a reckoning that made my innovations stronger. Dominic had tried to eliminate me, not realizing that by pushing me to the edge, he'd only ensured his own downfall. That evening, I received an unexpected email from Hudson Archer. Victoria, watched your interview today. The Western manufacturing plant exceeded efficiency projections by 23%. You were right about implementation timeline. Sometimes old dogs can learn new approaches. If you're interested in discussing the next phase, my door remains open. H.A. I smiled as I typed my response. Glad to hear about the Western plant. Happy to discuss next steps. This time, I'll bring the coffee. Victoria. My revenge wasn't destroying careers or companies. It was ensuring that innovation couldn't be buried, that truth couldn't be silenced with a simple text message. By standing my ground against both Dominic and Hudson Archer, I'd not only protected my work but potentially changed how an entire industry approached progress. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't about tearing someone down, it's about building something so valuable they have no choice but to recognize your worth. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more authentic stories of resilience and determination. Have you ever stood your ground when someone tried to take credit for your work? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else facing similar challenges. Remember, sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is refuse to be silenced.
The calendar notification blinked on my screen. Required, surgery pre-op appointment. Next to it, a second notification appeared. Mandatory, Kent's retirement celebration. Both scheduled for Thursday at 10 a.m. I stared at the screen, my heart racing. My surgery had been scheduled for months. A procedure to remove suspicious tissue they'd found during my last scan. The doctors had emphasized repeatedly how critical it was to not delay further. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, preparing to email Kent that I couldn't attend his retirement party. That's when my office phone rang. "Audra, I notice you haven't RSVP'd to my retirement gala," Kent said, his tone clipped and irritated. "I have a medical procedure scheduled that day. It's been on the calendar for—" "Cancel it," he interrupted. "This retirement party is non-negotiable for department heads. The entire board will be there, including our new CEO. You especially need to show up, considering your recent performance issues." My cheeks burned. The performance issues he referred to were directly tied to the days I'd missed for medical appointments, days he'd approved, then later criticized me for taking. "Kent, this is a potentially life-saving procedure. The doctors are concerned about—" "Everyone has health concerns, Audra. I've worked here for 37 years without missing a single important event. 37 years. Do you know how many family gatherings I've skipped for this company? My retirement party happens once. Your, whatever it is, can be rescheduled." I clutched the phone tighter, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I've been waiting 3 months for this surgery slot. Cancel your surgery. My retirement party is more important." Kent insisted, raising his voice. "This isn't a request. If you value your position here, you'll make the right choice." When I didn't immediately respond, he continued, his voice softening into something more menacing. "Think about your future here, Audra. Think about who'll be evaluating your promotion package next quarter. You've been with us, 5 years? That's nothing. I have friends in every corner of this industry. I'll see what I can do," I finally whispered. "That's better. Remember, Thursday, 10 a.m. Wear something appropriate, not like that outfit from the holiday party." The line went dead. I sat motionless, pressure building behind my eyes. My surgeon had warned me that postponing again could mean waiting another 6 months. 6 months of wondering if what was growing inside me was getting worse. 6 months of waking up each night, hand pressed against my side, imagining I could feel it spreading. Kent had always been ruthless, but this crossed every boundary. He'd seen me wince in meetings, noticed when I couldn't stand for presentations. He knew. He just didn't care. My hands trembled as I reached for my water bottle, accidentally knocking it over. Water pooled across my desk, seeping into the stack of reports I'd stayed until midnight finishing. Reports Kent would take credit for, as he always did. That was the moment something inside me shifted. "Wait, I need to pause for a moment. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. Your support means everything, and trust me, you'll want to hear how this unfolds. Go ahead, I'll wait." "Done? Great, let's continue." I'm Audra, by the way. Before all this happened, I was known as the peacemaker, the one who smoothed things over, who never made waves. I grew up in a household where conflict meant danger, so I learned to anticipate needs before they were voiced, to blend into backgrounds, to make myself useful without being noticed. At 33, I had climbed to head of operations through relentless work and strategic problem solving. I wasn't flashy or outspoken. My strength was in the details others overlooked. People underestimated me, Kent especially. I met Kent when I joined the company fresh out of grad school. He was already a legend then, the aggressive, results-driven executive who transformed struggling divisions into profit machines. His methods were questionable, but no one challenged his results. When he selected me for his team, I was flattered. That feeling evaporated during our first quarterly review when he took my carefully prepared analysis, removed my name, and presented it as his own work. When I privately mentioned it, he laughed. Welcome to the real world, kid. Ideas belong to whoever has the power to implement them. Over the years, I watched him crush competitors, subordinates, even supposed friends. He collected people's vulnerabilities like treasures, storing them away until they became useful weapons. I witnessed brilliant colleagues reduced to shadows after crossing him. One woman quit the industry entirely after Kent systematically dismantled her reputation following a minor disagreement. I survived by becoming indispensable while remaining invisible. I anticipated his needs, cleaned up his messes, and never, ever challenged him openly. Then came my diagnosis. The first symptoms were easy to dismiss: fatigue, occasional pain. By the time I couldn't ignore them anymore, my doctor's expression had turned grave. We need to remove this growth immediately, Audra. The location concerns me. Kent's initial response seemed understanding. He approved my time off, mentioned his sister's similar health scare. I believed he empathized. Then the passive-aggressive comments started. The scheduling of critical meetings during my doctor appointments. The subtle reminders about team members pulling their weight. The pointed stories about his own perfect attendance record despite far worse health issues. With each passing week, his behavior worsened. He questioned my commitment, my focus, my value, sometimes privately, sometimes in front of colleagues. People who once sought my input began excluding me from decisions. My carefully built professional foundation was crumbling. And now, this ultimatum: surgery or career. As I sat at my desk that day, watching water soak through my papers, I made a decision. I would go to my surgery as planned, but I wouldn't go quietly. The next morning, I arrived at work earlier than usual. The building was quiet, still waking up. I needed time alone to think, to plan. Kent's office door was ajar. He never bothered locking it, a display of his untouchable status. Inside, his walls were covered with photos of himself with industry leaders, celebrities, politicians, each image carefully selected to showcase his influence, his power. I stood in his doorway, studying the space where he'd spent more hours than in his own home, the place from which he'd controlled not just business operations, but people's lives, my life. My side throbbed, a persistent reminder of what was growing inside me. The doctor had used words like concerning and aggressive, words that matched Kent himself. I returned to my desk and pulled up the company organizational chart. Kent reported directly to Elena, our rarely seen CEO. She maintained a reputation for brilliance, mixed with intimidating detachment. Most employees had never exchanged more than a few words with her. Through my operations role, I had access to nearly everything: schedules, communications, decision histories. Kent relied on me to manage information flow, while never realizing how much I actually knew. For 5 years, I'd been the silent witness to Kent's methods. I'd seen him take credit for successes and assign blame for failures. I'd watched him strategically eliminate threats through careful character assassination. I'd heard him in closed meetings, revealing his true nature when he thought only allies were present. All those years of observation had taught me something crucial. Kent's greatest strength was also his greatest weakness, his absolute certainty that no one would ever challenge him directly. I pulled up my email and began typing a message to Elena, then stopped, deleted everything, and shut my laptop. Not yet. First, I needed to prepare. That evening, I stayed late, waiting until the office emptied. I needed to gather certain information before making my move. Information Kent believed was accessible only to him. As I worked, memories surfaced of all the times I'd enabled Kent's behavior. The fabricated performance reviews he'd asked me to draft for employees he wanted gone. The adjusted reports where unfavorable data mysteriously disappeared. The private conversations I'd pretended not to overhear. My complicity weighed on me. I had helped build the very system that was now crushing me. My phone buzzed with a text from Zeke, my neighbor who had driven me to previous medical appointments. Still on for Thursday pickup at 7 a.m.? I texted back, yes, and thanks again. Zeke had no idea what was happening at work. Nobody did. I'd kept my professional struggles as private as my medical ones. Wednesday morning, Kent called me into his office. Audra, good news. I've arranged for a videographer for tomorrow's event. I want everything captured. The speeches, the toast, the board's presence, all of it. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. You've confirmed you'll be there, correct? His eyes narrowed slightly. I've made arrangements, I answered carefully. Excellent. He leaned back in his chair. There's something else we should discuss. I've been thinking about your future here. My heart quickened. Elena mentioned potential restructuring after my departure. Several positions might be reevaluated. The threat couldn't have been clearer. Show up tomorrow or lose everything. I appreciate your concern for my career, Kent, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He smiled, mistaking my calmness for submission. That's what I've always liked about you, Audra. You understand how things work. As I turned to leave, he added, "Oh, and wear something nice tomorrow. The blue dress from last year's gala would work. It made you look almost presentable." I spent that night organizing everything I'd gathered. Sleep was impossible, both from pain and anticipation. By morning, I was exhausted, but focused. Zeke arrived at 7 a.m. sharp, concerned when he saw my appearance. "You okay? You look like you haven't slept." "Just nervous about the procedure," I said, which wasn't entirely a lie. At the hospital, the pre-op nurse took my vitals and frowned. "Your blood pressure's elevated. Anything stressing you out besides the surgery?" I laughed weakly, just deciding between life-saving medical care and career suicide. She didn't laugh. "That's not a choice anyone should have to make." "Some people disagree," I murmured as she inserted my IV. As the anesthesia began taking effect, my last conscious thought was of Kent standing before his audience, glass raised in self-congratulation, completely unaware of what was coming. I woke hours later, groggy and disoriented. A different nurse checked my incision and adjusted my medication. "Everything went well," she assured me. "The doctor will be by soon to discuss details." I reached for my phone, checking the time. 2:17 p.m. Kent's party would be in full swing. I had one crucial task to complete. With shaking hands, I opened my email and found the draft I'd prepared. I attached several files, added Elena's address, and hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I turned off my phone, closed my eyes, and finally allowed myself to rest. The days that followed passed in a haze of pain medication and fitful sleep. I declined all work calls, using my medical leave as the perfect shield. Information about what happened after my email reached me in fragments: text messages from concerned colleagues, vague voicemails, news articles that danced around specifics. 1 week after surgery, still recovering at home, I heard a knock at my door. Through the peephole, I saw Elena herself, standing in my hallway. My heart hammered as I opened the door. Elena was exactly as she appeared in company photos, immaculately dressed, expression unreadable, posture perfect. But photos hadn't captured the intensity of her gaze. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice neither friendly nor hostile. I stepped aside, suddenly conscious of my sweatpants and unwashed hair. She declined my offer of tea, settling instead on my sofa with practiced grace. "I thought we should speak directly, given the circumstances." I lowered myself carefully into a chair, mindful of my still healing incision. "First," she said, "how are you recovering?" The question surprised me. "Better, each day. The doctor says everything looks good so far." She nodded. "Good, that's good." She paused, studying me. "You've created quite a situation, Audra." "I know. Do you?" Her eyebrow arched. "The board is in an uproar. Legal is working overtime. And Kent." She trailed off. "Where is Kent?" I asked. "Currently? Meeting with his personal attorney, I imagine. He's been removed from company premises pending investigation." The words hit me with physical force. Kent, untouchable, invincible Kent, had been removed. "Your email was quite thorough," Elena continued, "though I'm curious why you sent it precisely during his retirement celebration. Would you have opened it otherwise?" I asked. For the first time, something like respect flickered across her face. Perhaps not immediately. And timing matters in situations like these. Indeed it does. She leaned forward slightly. "What I'm struggling to understand is why now? After 5 years of witnessing what you documented, why choose this moment to act?" I met her gaze directly. "Because he finally forced me to choose between my life and his ego, and I chose my life." Elena's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "That's perhaps the most honest answer I've heard in years." She stood to leave, then paused. "The board meets next Wednesday to discuss next steps. Your presence would be helpful." "I'll be there," I promised. After she left, I sat motionless, processing what had just happened. The wheels I'd set in motion were turning faster than I'd anticipated. Kent was already removed, the board was involved, and Elena had come to me personally. But this wasn't over. Kent had allies, people who'd benefited from his methods for years. They wouldn't let him fall without a fight. And if he somehow retained his influence, his retribution would be swift and merciless. I touched my side gently, feeling the bandage beneath my shirt. The doctor had removed what was threatening my life, but I had started something that could still destroy everything I'd worked for. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You have no idea what you've done. Kent has friends you've never even met. Sleep well." I stared at the message, a chill spreading through me. The real battle was just beginning. The anonymous text was just the beginning. Over the next few days, the pressure mounted like a physical weight. My work email filled with messages from Kent's longtime colleagues, some expressing shock, others thinly veiled threats disguised as concerns about my judgment. 3 executives canceled previously scheduled meetings with me. My team members grew quiet when I joined video calls, their eyes darting nervously off-screen. I understood their fear. For decades, Kent had represented what success looked like in our industry. Challenge him, and you challenge the entire system that had elevated countless careers built on the same ruthless principles he embodied. On Friday afternoon, my phone rang. The number was blocked. Audra, Kent's voice calm and measured in a way that made my skin crawl. "I thought we should chat before things get unnecessarily complicated." My mouth went dry. "I'm on medical leave. Any work discussions should happen when I return." "This isn't a work discussion." His tone shifted slightly. "This is me offering you a lifeline." I said nothing, waiting. "You're upset. I understand. The stress of your health situation, combined with the pressure of your role, it's affected your judgment. Anyone would sympathize. Is there a point to this call, Kent? Here's what's going to happen. You'll send a follow-up email explaining that your medication caused confusion, that in your compromised state, you misinterpreted normal business practices. I'll accept your apology privately, and we'll move forward." The audacity was breathtaking. "And if I don't?" His laugh was soft. "Audra, be realistic. You're a mid-level executive with performance issues who sent unsubstantiated accusations while under the influence of powerful medications. I'm a 37-year veteran with connections throughout the industry. My evidence isn't unsubstantiated." "Evidence?" The word carried a dismissive edge. "You mean the selective snippets you've misrepresented? Context matters, Audra, and I control the context." He paused, allowing his threat to settle. "You have until Monday to retract. After that, my legal team takes over. They're quite thorough." He hung up without waiting for my response. I sat motionless, the phone still pressed to my ear. Despite the calm in his voice, I detected something new, a faint undercurrent of uncertainty. Kent wasn't just calling to threaten me. He was testing me, trying to gauge how much I actually knew. The answer would have terrified him. Everything. Over the weekend, I focused on healing, both physically and mentally. I ignored the mounting messages, the increasingly hostile voicemails from numbers I didn't recognize. Instead, I prepared for Wednesday's board meeting, organizing my thoughts and reviewing the material I'd sent Elena. Tuesday night, Zeke brought dinner and sat with me as I picked at my food. "You haven't told me what's really happening," he said finally. "But 3 different people have knocked on my door asking questions about you. One claimed to be from HR. I set down my fork. "What did you tell them?" "That they should respect your privacy during medical recovery." He studied my face. "Audra, are you in trouble?" "I'm not sure yet," I answered honestly. "Either I've just ended my career, or I've done something that actually matters." "Those can both be true," he pointed out. "Yeah," I managed a small smile. "That's what scares me." Wednesday morning dawned clear and cold. I dressed carefully, selecting clothes that projected confidence while accommodating my still tender surgical site. Professional armor. The company headquarters looked unchanged as I entered the lobby, yet everything felt different. The security guard, who normally waved me through with barely a glance, studied my ID carefully before calling upstairs for confirmation. The elevator ride was silent, other passengers avoiding eye contact. Outside the boardroom, Elena's assistant waited. "They're ready for you," she said, her expression giving nothing away. I took a deep breath and walked in. The boardroom fell silent as I entered. 14 people seated around a massive table, with Elena at its head. Kent sat 3 chairs away from her, flanked by his 2 closest allies on the board. His expression was placid, controlled. A predator, waiting patiently. "Audra," Elena greeted me. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit." I took the single open chair directly across from Kent. No accident in that seating arrangement. As everyone has been briefed, Elena continued, we're here to address the allegations contained in Audra's communication from last week. Kent has requested the opportunity to respond first. After that, Audra will have equal time. Kent smiled warmly, activating the charm that had facilitated his rise. First, I want to express my concern for Audra's health. We're all relieved. Your procedure went well. Several board members nodded sympathetically. Perfect opening move. Establish himself as compassionate, while subtly reminding everyone I was operating under medical stress. What we have here is unfortunate but straightforward, he continued. A dedicated employee, under tremendous pressure, has misconstrued standard business interactions. In her compromised state, my state isn't compromised, I interrupted quietly. Kent's smile didn't waver. As I was saying, these allegations reflect a fundamental misunderstanding of executive decision-making. The documentation Audra provided lacks critical context. He spent the next 20 minutes systematically addressing each point from my email, offering alternative explanations, questioning the authenticity of certain exchanges, suggesting dates had been altered. He was masterful, weaving a counter-narrative that transformed my evidence into a collection of misunderstandings and technical misinterpretations. When he finished, the room felt different. Board members who had seemed receptive to my presence now watched me with skepticism. Audra, Elena said, your response? I didn't immediately speak. Instead, I placed my phone on the table, opened my bag, and removed a small portable speaker. I connected the two devices as the room watched in confused silence. Before I respond to Kent's version of events, I'd like you to listen to something, I said. I pressed play. Kent's voice filled the room. Audra, be realistic. You're a mid-level executive with performance issues who sent unsubstantiated accusations while under the influence of powerful medications. I'm a 37-year veteran with connections throughout the industry. My own voice clear and steady. My evidence isn't unsubstantiated. Kent again. Evidence? You mean the selective snippets you've misrepresented? Context matters, Audra, and I control the context. I stopped the recording and looked directly at Kent. His face had lost all color. That call came after I sent my email to Elena. A call in which you attempted to pressure an employee on medical leave to retract truthful statements. I turned to address the entire board. This is Kent's authentic management style when cameras aren't rolling. I played 5 more recordings. Kent demanding I falsify performance reviews. Kent instructing me to delete safety incident reports before regulatory review. Kent discussing how to circumvent the board's explicit directives on 3 separate projects. Kent revealing his strategy for forcing early retirement of employees he considered expendable. With each recording, Kent's carefully constructed persona disintegrated. By the final playback, he had abandoned his practiced calm. Those are illegally obtained recordings, he shouted. She can't use those. Actually, Elena interjected coolly, our state has one-party consent laws for recordings. If Audra was part of these conversations, the recordings are perfectly legal. They're taken out of context, Kent insisted, his face flushed. I smiled for the first time. Context matters, Kent. Isn't that what you said? Then I revealed what my email to Elena had really contained. Not just selected incidents, but a comprehensive 5-year record of Kent's systematic abuses. Every falsified report, every misrepresented financial projection, every instance of harassment disguised as mentorship, every ethical breach he'd justified as business necessity. The documents I sent Elena weren't random examples, I explained. They were organized evidence showing pattern and intent. I didn't just document what Kent did. I documented why he did it, who benefited, and most importantly, who was harmed. I turned to face the board directly. For 5 years, I enabled this behavior through my silence. That makes me complicit. I'm not asking for immunity or special treatment. I'm asking you to acknowledge that our company culture has rewarded Kent's methods while punishing those who challenge them. The silence that followed was profound. Finally, Elena spoke. Kent, I think it would be best if you stepped outside while the board discusses next steps. This is absurd, he sputtered. You can't possibly. Security is waiting in the hall, Elena interrupted, her voice steel. They'll escort you to your office, where you may collect personal belongings under supervision. Kent looked around the table, seeking allies. Finding none, he stood, straightened his jacket with forced dignity, and walked out without another word. The board's deliberation lasted hours. I answered countless questions, provided additional documentation, and withstood intense scrutiny of my own role in events. By late afternoon, the decision was unanimous. Kent was terminated immediately. His retirement benefits remained intact, a concession to legal reality rather than moral judgment, but his legacy was irreparably altered. 3 board members with close ties to Kent resigned that same day. As for me, I received a formal reprimand for failing to report ethics violations sooner. Fair, if incomplete acknowledgement of the impossible position I'd occupied. I was placed on extended paid leave while an independent firm conducted a broader investigation of our department. 6 weeks later, I returned to a transformed workplace. Elena had implemented sweeping cultural changes, including anonymous reporting systems, restructured performance metrics, and mandatory ethics training for leadership. My role had expanded to include oversight of these new accountability measures. The company didn't suddenly become perfect. Some of Kent's protégés remained, watching from the shadows, adapting their methods to the new reality. But something fundamental had shifted. People spoke up in meetings, junior staff asked challenging questions. The fear that had permeated every interaction gradually lifted. On my first day back, I found a handwritten note on my desk. No signature, but I recognized Elena's precise handwriting. Sometimes the most important surgeries remove what's been poisoning us for years. I kept that note as a reminder that systems don't change until someone risks everything to challenge them. That someone had been me, but it didn't have to stop there. Every person who witnessed what happened learned the same lesson I had. Silence enables abuse, but courage is contagious. If my story resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. I share these real-life experiences hoping they'll inspire you to recognize when your own moment of truth arrives. Because trust me, in every workplace, in every relationship, that moment will come. The only question is whether you'll be ready when it does. Leave a comment below about a time you had to stand up against someone who seemed untouchable. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now.